Sudah mulai, orang-orang udah pada masuk, tapi mungkin kita tunggu.
Good morning, everyone.
lagi ya.
I see that many people are starting to join. Let's wait for 2 more minutes.
Selamat pagi semuanya. Ya, saya lihat ada banyak yang masuk ke Zoom, termasuk pembicara juga. Jadi sepertinya kita bisa mulai ya. Selamat pagi Ibu, Bapak, dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Semoga Bapak Ibu yang hadir pada kesempatan kali ini dalam keadaan yang
Ladies
baik
and
dan sehat.
gentlemen, we hope that you're all in good condition. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Sarah from JPAL Southeast Asia, and today I will be the moderator of our today's activity. I'd like to thank all your participations and your time to attend this development analysis forum organized by JPAL Southeast Asia, and we will hear and listen to the results of teaching program or program mengajar study results. And before we start, please observe the materials and house rules that we have shared with you. And during the webinar, I'd like to inform you that this dissemination forum will be using Indonesian as its main language. Therefore, we provide interpretation service from Indonesian into English and into Indonesian Sign Language. We will have a Q&A session after the presentations, and during this program, feel free to type your questions on the Q&A box. I will read your questions, or you can also use the raise hand feature so that I can open your microphone during the Q&A session. And if you send your questions, please also include the information of who you want to ask and your organization. And this program will be recorded and will be broadcasted. And allow me to read our today's agenda. We will open our dissemination from with quick remarks from JPL Southeast Asia. And then we will discuss about the results of program mengajar to students' math skills. Will be presented by Mr. Gilang as the analyst of this study. Then we will continue with a Q&A session. And without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Rizka as Policy Manager from JPAL Southeast Asia to give her opening remarks. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? I hope my voice is clear. I'd like to give you a brief introduction about JPAL Southeast Asia for you Maybe for those of you who haven't heard about JPAL Southeast Asia, JPAL, we are a research organization focused on eliminating poverty through programs and social programs based on empirical evidence or researches. JPAL is based in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the United States of America. We are the representative of JPAL Southeast Asia. We are in charge of conducting researches, and this particular one is called impact evaluation. We have done various or numerous impact evaluations conducted by our networks spread across universities in the country or in Indonesia. We from JPAL Southeast Asia, we were established back in 2013 in Indonesia, and we are based in the Faculty of Economics of Business, University of Indonesia in its Salemba campus. We have done a lot of researches, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And today, we will focus on one of the sectors, which is education. For those of you who have known JPAL in its initial years, in our initial years, we were focused on informing social protection programs. There were several programs on which we cooperate with governmental institutions such as on programs of PKH, BLT, and Raskin, or now known as the Sembako or Basic Foods Basic Staple Program. We communicated on how to support these government programs to make them more effective. And for today, as I mentioned before, we are going to focus our discussion on the education sector. And here is a brief snapshot of several studies we conducted in this education sector. First, during the pandemic, we conducted a survey to better understand the implementation of home learning when many schools were closed down during the COVID-19 pandemic. And before that, back in 2009, we also conducted an impact evaluation on doubling the salary of school teachers, the impact of doubling the salary of school teachers. And today we're going to share with you in further detail about one of the evaluations that our researchers just completed, which is an impact on the use of computer-assisted learning and a pedagogical training for teachers on improving students' numerical skills. So that's introduction about JPAL. If you have any questions, feel free to send your question to us, and I'm giving back to Sarah. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rizka, for your introduction. Next, let's invite Mr. Gilang and Ms. Milda to present about the result of the teaching program study. And a little introduction about our speakers. Mr. Gilang is Associate Professor at the Department of Economics, Universitas Gadjah Mada, and Vice Dean of Research and Engagements, Social Commitment at the Economics and Business Universitas of Gadjah Mada. Ms. Milda is the lecturer at Universitas Indonesia, a researcher, and also Economic and Social Research Institute, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Time is yours. Okay, can everyone hear me? Great, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Gilang and I will represent our team to present with you, to present to you the result of our study. titled Catching Up is Hard to Do, Intra-curricular Technology Adoption, Teacher Training, and Student Learning Gaps. So let me start. This is the outline that we're going to discuss today. And the study wouldn't be possible without the support of all our partners and funders for this study. We would like to acknowledge the funding from ADBI Institute, ADB, and DFAT. And the study wouldn't be possible without the hard work of our team, starting from Tari opening up the way, and then Indri and Miranda. Without their hard work, we wouldn't be able to be here presenting about this study today, including the team. Excuse me for some technical issue, including our field team in Semeru and Surala. Let us start with a little bit of background of the study. First, this is the data that we look at. There are many students in lower and middle income countries who do not have foundational mathematical skills. We can see in this graph that 80% of students have their mathematical skill levels are below the minimum level. And to couple that, additionally, the students also have problems with higher order thinking skills. And is it possible for them to catch up? That's the question, a significant question to pose if we talk about education in LRIC. There are some ideal solutions to catch up and improve the HOTS. Maybe we're all familiar with differentiated teaching. It's a solution that is pretty cost effective to improve foundational skills. But the problem in LMIC countries or in LMICs, it requires motivated and skillful teachers. And as we know, that's still a problem with LMICs. One of the things that we could do is to use technology to help solve the problem with foundational skills. But maybe that's not enough because of that, we still need training for teachers so that teachers can help their students achieve higher order thinking skill through a problem-based learning method. And to answer these challenges, or what we did in this study is we conducted two interventions. The first is an intervention to help improve foundational skills. We did it by implementing computer adapted learning software, specifically to help study in mathematics. And to improve HOTS, we also implemented a teacher training program to improve the teacher's pedagogical ability to facilitate HOTS. Those were done to help answer the research questions, which is first, does the adoption of CAL and pedagogical training in public schools improve students' mathematics outcomes? And the second research question is, what's the effect or what's the impact if we look at the varying background of the students and the teachers. So what we did was we implemented this intervention in Indonesia. We know that in Indonesia, we still have many problems related to learning outcomes. In terms of access, 99% of students in Indonesia are already registered in a junior high school, but consistently, Indonesia students' mathematical scores are still considered low. Almost no students have mathematical skill levels that is considered proficient. Almost 82% of 15-year-old students remain below the minimum level. So we can see that Indonesia can be a place where we can study and look at the impact of these two interventions. And this is the contribution of this study to the literature. Um, Different from most of the literature, our focus is on the secondary schools or or junior high schools. And we focus specifically on public junior high schools. We didn't include private junior high schools in the intervention. And if we compare this to the nearest study, it was a study done by Moralari Garansing and Damian. And we also focused on teacher training to improve higher order thinking skills of students. And the last one is that we wanted to see the complementarity between teachers and technology. All of these are this study's contributions to the literature. So now let's discuss it in further detail. Let's discuss the intervention and its impacts. We'll start first with the program components. The intervention consists of three components. The first one is basic training. It's a basic training for teachers. The second one is computer-based adaptive learning, or what we often name call. Collectively, we call it high tech. And the third element is pedagogical training. We call it high touch. I will explain them in further details one by one. The basic training consists of a 3-day training, a 3-day 10-hour preliminary training session. The objective is for us to give the teachers skills to improve students' curiosity and their motivation or their eagerness to learn, and also to facilitate interactive mathematics classes. And the teachers are also taught on how to develop their skills, students' skills and students' ability in the context of a class with variety. And the second component, because it's related to technology, we cooperated with Surala, which is determined based on a competitive bidding. The reason why we chose Surala, there are several of them. First, they have been working for quite a long time in Indonesia. They already have materials that has been adapted to Indonesian curriculum. Secondly, they are not too expensive. For their subscription cost is only 20% of public spending allocation. The last two considerations, because Surala has been in Indonesia for a long time, they can share the impacts of their programs so far in Indonesia. And one of the most important things is that they provide training programs for teachers, a 20-hour training program for teachers on how to use Surala in classrooms. And the last one is that they provide post support. They provide support during the implementation process. The third component is the pedagogical training. This training's objective is to improve higher order thinking skill. The material presented is provided to help teachers create mathematical questions that can help improve students' mathematical thinking skills, how it trains teacher on how to create a differentiated mathematical questions, differentiated between among students, how to facilitate strategic problem solving and create lesson plans for interactive classes. We also conducted a post-training support for this pedagogical training. And the following are the three components that we implement at schools. To see the impacts of the programs that we did, we designed an impact evaluation using a random evaluation method. In this random evaluation, method, we use several selection criteria. The first one is because there is a technology component, we need to select schools that already have adequate computer labs. Secondly, we select schools that are not part of other educational programs, either from the government or other programs from non-governmental organizations. Uh, Among these schools, then we conduct a stratification at the sub-district level based on the school's national exam scores. We conducted a randomization. Random assignment is implemented at school level to improve scale over. At the end of the process, we conduct intervention in 4 regencies, Jakarta, Kendal, Tegal, and Semarang City, in 146 public junior high schools. And in every school, we take 2 samples of 2 math teachers and 60 students. And that is about 3 to 4 classes per school. And this is the metrics of the treatment assignment. We have 3 treatment arms. The first one is what we call as high tech, high touch. For this treatment arms, the school will receive all the components. The school receive components 1, 2, and 3. 50 schools are assigned for this treatment, but only 48 of them join until the end. The second treatment arm is high tech only. The schools only receive components 1 and 2. In this case, the teachers don't get pedagogical training. They only get basic training and computer adaptive learning. Here, 50 schools are assigned, but only 49 stay until the end. And for control schools, the control schools don't get any components. We assign 49 school in as control, and all of them are involved until the end of the program. And this is the randomization design in its visual form, because we also want to see the impact of skill over. So during the end line, we also conduct a survey, not only on the students in the treatment, but also to students who do not get treatment in the treatment schools. With that, we are able to answer questions related to each component. The first one, we could see the impact of the basic training without computer adapted learning. Secondly, we were able to see the impact of computer adapted learning as a standalone. And the third one, we could see the impact of pedagogical training. And the last one is we could see the impact of the stepped over. What about data collection procedures? What we implemented in one academic year, which is from August 2022 until June 2023. Before we implemented the program, we conducted a baseline survey in July until August 2022. We also conducted an inline survey at the end in March until May 2023. For the inline survey, we added the samples in treatment school, which is students who didn't get the treatments. The instruments are first, we conducted a student learning assessment. We conducted a mathematical exam on the students, and we conducted a survey or surveys to the school principal or administrative staff, survey on the teachers, and also the students. We also conducted classroom observations during the teaching and learning programs in the classrooms. And we also have administrative data from the software itself. From the Suralaya Ninja, we receive administrative data. So how did we measure the math achievement? What we need to share with you here is that when we measured the mathematical students' mathematical skills, we divided it into three learning domains. First is what we call as knowing, secondly, applying, and the third one is reasoning. The total score is the combination of these three domains. And the SLA instruments consist of 20 questions based on the three domains. 60% of the questions cover lessons from grade 1 until 6 or class 1 until 6. 40% of the questions cover the lessons from grade 7. And these are the outcomes of each domain. So 50% of questions cover the domain of knowing, 30% to cover the domain of applying, and 20% of the questions cover reasoning domain. Knowing is basically recalling students' ability to recall basic foundational as a concept or basic foundational skills. Applying is how questions can be made more practical or for practical solutions. In reasoning, it's about analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information to solve problems. And the following are sample questions in the three domain. As you can see in knowing domain, the questions are very simple. In applying, it starts to get complicated, and in reasoning, the question becomes stories where students have to solve the problems in it. And these are the outcomes of the baseline or the result, the data of baseline characteristics, covariate balance, and attrition. Average students are in the at the age of 12 years old. Half of them are students, and average age of teachers are around 40 years old, and almost half are females. What we'd like to highlight from this table is when we conducted an SLA on the baseline, the average correct response rate was only 35% across the treatment groups as well as the control groups. When we look at it across domains, the lowest correct response rate was at the applying domain, and the highest scores were achieved in the knowing domain. It's in line with our expectation. We also conducted a covariate balance and selective attrition test to ensure the outcomes are in good condition. And for empirical strategy, results, and policy recommendation, I'd like to invite my colleague. Thank you, Milda, and everyone who have joined us. Thank you for all the principal investigators who are joining us. We have Daniel, Sandy, and I believe Takiko is also here. Thank you. To our colleague, thank you, Milda, for sharing our study. And let me focus on 3 points. Empirical strategy to estimate the impact of HTO and HTST's outcomes, and policy recommendations. To estimate the outcomes of HTO and HTHT, we utilize empirical specifications. The following is the empirical specifications. With the design and the existing data, we estimated the intent to treat or ITT. We have Y as the outcome variable, the math learning outcomes for on students as a whole, entirely, or based on domains, knowing, applying, and reasoning. On the right-hand side, we have the fixed effects and indicators for high-tech only, indicators for high-tech, high-touch. We also include several other control variables. The control variables include students' characteristics, school characteristics, and students' learning outcomes at the baseline, and average of mathematical outcomes at the schools during or at the baseline. We also added related factors related to standard factors as clustered at school level. And we were interested in gamma 1 and gamma 2. That explains the impact of HTO and HTHT in order or consecutively. We also benchmark our estimated outcomes with previous study outcomes with randomized evaluation. In general, Indonesian students learn in primary schools. There is an increase of one standard deviation or a yearly average is increased by 0.15 as per the BT study by BT 2021. In developing countries, students learn 0.15 until and now we would like to share with you some of the results that we acquire from this study. The first one is the general result. You can see that the HTO and HTHT interventions, be it for control variables, with control variables as well as without control variables, we didn't find any impact to the general math learning. We obtain the same finding on two domains, knowing and applying domains. We found a significant impact of high-tech, high-touch intervention to students' ability in the reasoning domain. And later we will explain to you further because the result that we acquire from this table does not depict heterogeneity of variety that exists in. We will explain why the HTO and HTHT are not significant to learning outcome. One of the findings from a further qualitative study post this study is that we found that the teachers used their math lesson hours, which is usually 5 hours in a week. They only use 2 to 3 learning hours on Surala for Sulara. The focus on Surala itself is to increase foundational math skills of students so that the time for the teachers to teach math to a grade 7 is reduced. That is our initial notes, but let's look at the result based on the groupings, the groups that we believe are deserve to be analyzed. And this is the result by subgroup. We will start from the first subgroup, which is based on gender. On the column where female equals 1, explains that HTO and HTHT impact is for the male students or boys. Here we see that the impact of HTO and HTHT is negative among male students and significant on high-tech only. And we found that the impact for HTO and HTHT is positive, even though the significant impact is only found on HTO. About 0.13 is quite significant. You see in the previous slides that the median impact of randomized evaluation in education is about 0.06 standard deviation. So a 0.13 impact is almost the same as 1 year worth of schooling, and that's pretty significant. In the next group, which is based on students' skills, we divided by median. They students under the median and those above the median. We haven't found any impact. And another significant or important finding is in the group based on effectiveness of teachers. By using the control group data, we call it teachers' effectiveness. We divide the teachers based on those with scores below the median. We call them less effective teachers, and those above the median or effective teachers. In this column, we see that the impact of high tech only as well as HTHT on students taught by less effective teachers. We see that students taught by less effective teachers at the baseline received a positive impact of HTO as well as HTST. And on the other hand, or on the opposite side, students taught by effective teachers uh, receive a negative impact, meaning their math learning outcomes at the end line is lower, considering other factors that we could observe. Another interesting find is when we divide the groups based on whether they are above or below the median of students' learning outcome scores, and we divide it based on teachers' effectiveness. In this column, we see that students, both below as well as above the median, who are taught by teachers above the median scores or taught by effective teachers, we found that among the students, among the weaker students, we see a negative impact when they are taught by effective teachers at the baseline. A different finding is for the less effective students when taught by less effective teachers at the baseline. We found a positive impact in their setting or with them. This is interesting. And one of the qualitative depiction of this is that the more effective teachers, at the baseline will be more effective to teach and achieve students' learning for grade 7 had there not been any intervention. One of the consideration is that because the interventions take several hours of learning that they could actually use to teach students with the traditional methods they've been using. We would also like to share with you several outcomes or results. If we break it based on learning domains, knowing, applying, as well as reasoning domains. In the uh, following up the previous study, the positive impacts of HTO and HTHT on girls are found on girls, but not found on boys. And further, we can see a positive impacts among students are specifically on knowing and applying dimensions. We didn't see a significant impact on the domain of reasoning. As was previously done, we also see a significant impact on students' learning outcomes among students uh, who are taught by teachers with scores below the median or above the median at the baseline. We see that the HTO as well as HTST interventions give a positive impacts to the students, especially on the knowing and applying domains, as specifically for students taught by less effective teachers. But similarly, as we have seen in the previous table, HTO and HTHT intervention give negative impact to students taught by effective teachers at the baseline, specifically on knowing and applying domains. we didn't see any significant impact on the intervention to a learning outcome, especially in reasoning domains, both for students taught by effective as well as those taught by less effective teachers. The next finding that's also interesting, as we elaborate in the previous slide, is that the negative impact is seen on students with scores below median. The negative impacts are particularly seen in knowing and applying domains. And we also found that high tech, high touch, or HTHT apparently increased students' reasoning skills, particularly the reasoning skills of students with scores below the median. So there is no negative impacts of knowing and unknowing and applying, but HTHT can positively improve students with under the median who are taught by effective teachers. We also found that the impact among students who are taught by less effective teachers showing positive impacts, especially on knowing and applying. In general, the impacts we get from the HTO and HTHE interventions to knowing and applying are concentrated on students below the median, but the impacts would be different if they were taught by effective teachers at the baseline when compared to less effective teachers at the baseline. Milda mentioned that we also collected observation data at class level done by facilitators. We paid attention to a number of things. We collect data of a number of things. First is whether teachers give open questions to students and how often teachers give open questions to students, and whether the teachers give positive feedback to students. We see not only in intensive as well as in intensive extensive margins. And we look at how often they did that, and we could see that HTHT intervention, specifically relatively to HTO, improves probability and duration of the teachers giving open questions to students and giving students positive feedback. This is one of the explanations why HTHT is effective to improve learning outcomes, specifically on reasoning for students with learning outcomes below the median at the baseline. So with the randomized evaluation design, it allows us to evaluate the impact of each program component, as Melda mentioned. At least we could see first the impact of basic training component, and secondly, the impact of the implementation of computer adapted learning by Surala, and third, the impact of pedagogical training to improve higher order thinking skills, and specifically the impact of basic training without CAL. We look at the students who were taught by teachers who received basic training but didn't receive CAL, and we compare that to a control group who didn't receive any intervention. We found a pretty significant and a pretty big impact, especially for knowing and applying skills from among less effective teachers at the baseline, during the baseline. We see this impact both in HTO intervention as well as HTHT intervention. And then we also were able to calculate combined impact of basic training and pedagogical training without CAL, or computer assisted learning. And we found the same or similar significant and positive impacts on student skills in the domains of knowing and applying. And next, we also found a specific impact of computer adaptive learning or surala. Among the less effective teachers during the baseline, we found that the impact to knowing is negative, both from HTO as well as HTHT interventions, but a positive impact for reasoning skills from HTHT intervention. Among the effective teachers, we also found a negative impact on knowing skills, especially on from HTO intervention. This is one of the explanations that we found. Uh, so during a qualitative study, we found that implementation of CAL integrated into curriculum takes some of the mathematical study hours, which were previously used for mathematical teaching using traditional methods, and also which were also focused on specific problems for the grade 7 students. We also looked at the impact of the pedagogical training, both for the less effective teachers as well as the effective teachers. We haven't found any impacts. So overall, ladies and gentlemen, we could see the impact of HTO and HTHT intervention on students' learning, on knowing and applying skills and also reasoning skills, specifically concentrated among students who are below the median and who were also taught by less effective teachers during baseline. We also found that HTO as well as HTHT positively impact female students, but do not significantly positively impact, even negatively impact male students. From this qualitative study findings that we conducted post intervention, we found that students are enthusiastic and they were quite happy with implementation of surala. They did the problems, or they followed the problems enthusiastically, but that enthusiasm somehow wither along the time. But persistence is required in solving problems, especially problem solving questions that are considered uh, problems of higher order thinking skill. I believe that qualitative findings cannot entirely be generalized, but it can stimulate further research on why the different result on different genders in the study. And on students taught by less effective teachers, we found that there is an increase in learning outcomes in knowing and applying domains. But students who were taught by effective teachers um, received or get a negative impact. The result shows that effective teachers before the intervention can be more efficient in teaching math or in producing mathematical knowledge compared to the implementation of the software. As an explanation, this software can improve students' ability to recall some basic foundational skills, even though it still opens possibility for students if they wish to study further skills, because the software makes it possible. It's just that with the limited time provided, which is the limited study hours, it limits teachers and students' ability to achieve significant progress using this software. And based on components, the result shows that the impact of basic training is effective, especially on the less effective teachers at the baseline. In my remaining time, I would like to share with you several notes on the challenges and recommendations as a follow-up to the challenges. First is, of course, in digital infrastructure. It's not only about laboratory availability, but also computers, headphones, and also the quality of internet. And it's not only about infrastructure availability. We also need to ensure equality of um, the infrastructure availability in an area. I believe that is important. The next point is a challenge to the implementation of program, specifically Surala program. During the classroom or math as teaching hours or intra-curricular hours, it's interesting to identify alternative implementation of the program. For example, rather than implementing it during the intracurricular study hours, we can also implement it after school hours. There is an anecdote in this study that says that 1 to 2 schools implemented it after school hours, but in general, most schools still implement it during intracurricular hours. And we need to also determine targets. We need to conduct targeting on students who were able to follow Urala itself. Because among the students below the median, we see a positive impact in knowing and applying. This can also correlate to improvement of basic skills because they used Surala. From the use of Surala, this is something that we could analyze further, but we also need to identify who uh, are the other groups who can benefit from Surala's intervention and also from the training to teachers. The last point is the teacher's pedagogical skills, and we see that basic trainings on differentiated learning, improving students' awareness on or improving teachers' awareness on the use of the approach can be effective when combined to pedagogical training to improve students' skills in the higher order thinking skills. We have KKG or teacher work group. This can be one of the modalities to share materials or classrooms implementation strategies, and also lesson plans that can be implemented in the classrooms. The qualitative report that we put together found that apparently the sharing modality is already there, including through teachers or work groups, but it's been there. But sharing is not yet done systematically based on the materials they receive, both from basic training as well as from the training for higher order thinking skills. A number of things that we need to take into consideration for implementation in the next opportunity are: first, would it be enough for us to implement it in one academic year? If we were to implement it for 2 years, maybe we would be able to see a different impact. And apart from that, we also need to ask, would it be enough for the implementation to be in 2 to 3 math study hours out of the total of 5 math study hours within a week? For students to be able to continue their progress, not only at the foundational skills on Surala, but also to continue to more advanced next stages, students need more time for that. And this can be done, for example, after school hours. And next, apart from the implementation of Surala or whatever software that is used for math studies or for teacher training, be it basic training on differentiated learning or training on improving students' skills for on higher order thinking skills. We also want to continue that effort with accountability at public schools to ensure that the students' accounts will be an evaluation data for teachers. Next, implementation of differentiated learning or the basic training or implementation of Suralan is that late for students at grade 7. It's true that in the context that where we implemented it, majority of the students are the ones who during the 5th, even 4th grade, they were already impacted by the pandemic. We know the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The question is it already too late for us to implement it in grade 7? If it's a yes, then differentiated learning might not significantly give impact with or without technology. So it's important for us to map students' skills earlier. The literature shows that differentiated learning implemented when the students are in the 4th, 5th, or 6th grade show the biggest impact compared to uh, implementing it at an earlier stage. But we haven't got any evidence when this of its implementation at a later stage or when the students are in grade 7. Thank you on behalf of our researcher and investigator team. We thank everyone who have contributed, who has given their significant contributions. It involves 100 individuals helping to conduct this research. We highly appreciate all of those support. In the remaining time, we would be delighted to answer your questions of clarifications or to listen to your comments or feedback. With that, I will give it back to Sarah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gilang and Ms. Milda, for your presentation of the study output. There are many new lessons learned and new insights from the presentation. So now maybe we can open the Q&A session. In this session, we'd like to invite all the participants to give your questions. You can also directly mention your question or maybe give your feedback on the new learning that you hear from the study. Feel free to use the raise hand feature to be given a chance to say your questions. You can also type your questions on the Q&A column for me to read your questions. And while we are waiting for the questions from the audience, we actually have collected several questions from the chat box or Q&A box. Let me read them. For the first question batch, the question is on samples and sample of students who didn't receive treatment. The first question is from Ms. Prita. How do the research team handle students in treated schools who did not receive the intervention? It seems like these students are aware that they didn't receive the intervention and they try to access the intervention. The second question was from Ms. Anissa. What are the characteristics of teachers who are less effective and those who are effective? What makes a less effective teachers show even a more positive impact compared to effective teachers? Thank you, Sarah. I will start, and Milda will also add. Thank you, Ms. Prita and Ms. Nisa, for your questions. To Ms. Prita's question, it's true that in general, we conducted a communication first to the educational office department in each regency where we conduct our study and to the school principals. In those opportunities, we inform them at the beginning that there will be limitations to implementation of this computer adapted learning itself at each school. So that there will be a rumble who will receive benefits while the others might haven't might not yet receive it. And as Miss Prita and the others predicted, students were interested, especially students who didn't receive Surala in schools who receive HTO as well as STHC interventions. That reality is always there. And yes, the students are not going to be able to access the facility for one academic year, but we communicated it to the educational department or Department of Education, who will then communicate it to the teachers in charge of math subjects. And to the question from Miss Nisa, we try to repeat how we identified effectiveness of the teachers. We used data from a comparison group at the baseline. We also conducted a regression of students' study outcomes on several characteristics of the teacher, such as gender, uh, teachers' educational achievements, teachers of the full-time status, the teachers with certificates, etc. With that model, we then use that to predict effectiveness of the teachers in all across the groups at HTO as well as in HTHT groups. And then we divide them between teachers who are above the median, we call them effective, and teachers who are below the medium scores, we call them less effective teachers. One of the weaknesses of this approach is that we weren't able to specifically identify the characteristics that makes these teachers effective or not. This is a combination of several characteristics that we were able to observe uh, from the data. And of course, like our other challenges in data analysis, there are factors or characteristics that we don't observe on the students that are strongly correlate with their effectiveness, but that cannot be included into our effectiveness prediction of the teachers. Milda, do you have any additional points? Yes, maybe I just would like to add to the question from Prita. They are aware, but because the way they access Surala, because every student has unique IDs. So the spillover is probably can only be done, for example, to students who get the will share that with students who didn't receive the program. So that's the potential spillover because every student were given unique IDs. I just would like to re-emphasize what Gilang said, that it's true that in the process, in the negotiation process on who to get the program, that also took a long process. That's why the preparation of the implementation took up until 1 year because it involves negotiation. We had to conduct additional study, etc. So if a similar program is to be done, there is something to be considered at the program development stage. This on effective and less effective teachers, there are a number of things that we look at in terms of analysis, but we see that it is quite representative to describe the quality of the teaching. So when we determined the characteristics, we use various considerations based on literature as a basis. is not complete, but that is the best approach that we could do for data that we have today. Maybe that's my additional points. Thank you very much, Ms. Milda and Mr. Gilang. Next, we have another two questions on the study results or study outcomes. The first question is from Mr. Kasti. Are there any variety of the results in different regions, such as the result in Jakarta versus other regions? Can HTHT intervention can be implemented in other subjects? And on results as well is also from Ms. Prita. Did the researcher team collect and observe time it takes for students to answer questions? With Surala, are the students able to answer questions um, more quickly, or do the students become more easily bored, etc.? Thank you. First, we'd like to answer the question from Miss Asi or Mr. Asi on varying impacts by regions. It's going to be challenging to see the results by location or by regions because the number of samples in every region will reduce the precision of the estimate. So that's on looking at it by location. But related to the next question, we have administrative data from the use of Surala software itself. The use of the software includes, for example, gives information of students' progress during intervention and at the baseline. We could then see the students' progress in each topic. For example, in summation, in multiplication, and other topics. When we group them into the elementary schools or secondary schools, we receive data of students' response and time they need in each topic. Unfortunately, we are not yet able to share with you about the data in this meeting, but from the data, we can see that for the treatment group only, but not on the control group. In general, there is a progress between the baseline and the end line, and there is an increase in the skills of summation, addition, or deduction, and the increase or the improvement. However, the improvement cannot be claimed as an impact because we cannot compare that against the progress of control groups that might have happened during the time. But we can see that in Tegal, Kendal regencies, in Semarang City, as well as in Jakarta City. Next, on whether the high-tech and high-touch concept be able to be implemented in other subjects in general, yes, it can. To our knowledge, Surala software is not only helping numerical skills, but can also help improve literacy ability or skills. And there are many software programs, other software programs that do not just focus on numerical ability, but also literacy. Of course, with various different um, variety. Next is about how the teachers teach the skills of further literacy. That can also be implemented. But previous studies in general focused on numerical or numeracy or numerical skills. And to Miss Prita's question, the data is available and is quite complete. It's not only data of students' response, but also students' progress in by topic and a student's probability to continue on to the next topic. We have the data, but it's just that we haven't analyzed those data for this meeting or for this presentation. An interesting note in the qualitative study, which I mentioned, is that students' interests were quite high at the beginning. However, we see a decline in the interest along the way. That can be explained for something that it can be explained for something that is repetitive. To solve problems that are quite repetitive, even though they come in different numbers, but they're quite the same in pattern. We also found that along the time, there was an impression that students get the pressure to be able to continue on to the next stage. But of course, this qualitative finding cannot be generalized too far. This only gives us an interesting nuance on the use of Surala program by the students. I'd like to invite Milda if you have any additional points. Maybe I'd like to add a little. So here we used Surala program, but actually there are many other programs out there. It's not a presentation to promote Surala. I just would like to mention that. So what there are still so many other questions that we can see that we can answer now, including on whether if we use a different software, will the result be the same, etc. At this point, we don't know the answer to. So in terms of response time, we have actually conducted several analysis on responses, but as Gilang said, that is a bit difficult to generalize because that's not a randomized data. That can only be an indication of an estimate. That can only be an indication of the process or the mechanism of the students reaching the result. But we cannot use it for impact evaluation analysis. We do have the details, but it's just that we're analyzing it, and we need to be careful in interpreting what we generate. Because our information that we generate only for on a control group, because the use is quite different. After getting it published, everything will be combined into one paper. I hope everyone is excited to read it after the research is published. Thank you for the answers. We still have one more question from the audience, from Miss Yeti. She would like to get confirmation on the intervention. This is done on grade 7 students. Psychologically, are there any differences of learning type or learning ability between students, female and male students on uh, that grade, such as with the use of audio visual? The follow-up question is, did the researchers conduct cross-analysis between students' ability who are below and above median in different genders? And is there any difference among students in the initial ability? Yes, it's true that the intervention is conducted on students at grade 7. They are on average at the age of 12 years. To explain the motivation why grade 7 students, this is a pretty interesting literature contribution, because many studies on how to achieve a student's learning outcome are in elementary schools, but not yet in secondary school. Secondly, these students are those who are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that the impact of COVID-19 pandemic to students' learning outcome is quite significant. We do not have any too strong reason on why the impact we see is more on the female students and not on the male students. We haven't done any analysis based on whether the students are below or above median, or whether they are from different genders. One factor is precision. The smaller that would require us analyzing smaller groups, and that would impact precision of the analysis. And it also opens up opportunities for those who are interested in the impacts of intervention of CAL on differentiated learning, and also from teacher training impact to female as well as male students. It's interesting, is an interesting thing to further analyze. Milda, any additional points? Yes. We also received a question when we presented the result of the study in Kendal and Yogyakarta. So this is actually a question that is quite difficult for us to answer, because we is we didn't look at different behaviors between genders. But in general, in those cities, there is a tendency that female students have better learning outcomes compared to male students. So maybe, yes, there could be a psychological process that unfortunately cannot be answered by this study, but hopefully this opens new questions that we can try to answer in the next questions, because the because this research might not be able to answer all the questions about differentiated learning, or even about technology based learning. So hopefully this study sparks new research interest to see the learning processes, not just in elementary schools but also in secondary schools, because there are many gaps that we actually don't know. There are so many gaps that are not yet answered in the context of secondary schools. If we look at the literature, most focus on the elementary education. Hopefully this study can be the beginning for us to complete researches in trying to answer gaps in secondary schools, because education is not only elementary but also secondary and higher level. Thank you for the answers. I'd like to inform everyone that we still have 8 more minutes. If you have questions, feel free to raise hands or type your questions on the Q&A chat box. So we had a question from Ms. Nisa based on the presentation. Uh, can we conclude that this differentiated learning is better presented or provided for the on grade the fourth or fifth or sixth grade on math subjects? Finding on differentiated learning shows that the impact of differentiated learning to students' outcome is highest in grade 4 until grade 6. While waiting for any other questions, do the speakers have additional points? Yes, thank you, Sarah. I'd like to inform you that from the portfolio of studies on differentiated learning and teaching with CAL, the biggest outcome from the method is when the teaching is provided to students of grade 3 to 5, depending on the elementary school systems. Some schools have it until grade 5, some have it until grade 6. But in those grades, first, the gaps are already happening. So when the teachers conduct assessments, if the students are in the third, for students on the third grade, and compare their mathematical ability with other grades. So a differentiated learning can already be effective in that context. And for students who are in their early stage, such as grade 1, are there any gaps? In general, there are, but not too significantly. So the marginal return of differentiated learning and teaching at the right level are not going to be as significant as uh, further grades or as in the next grades. If the schools will have to choose with the limited funding and resources at, to prioritize the grade on which this program is implemented, then the studies offer that this program need to be implemented in the grades 3, 4, and 5. If I may add a little, even though we have that conclusion, this study doesn't mean this study says that when the students already have gaps at grade 7, we can only give up. There are still things we can do, and that's what require further studies to see if when the gaps is there when the students are at grade 7, because by the time they're at grade 7 the gaps would already be significant. Yes, it needs a significant effort, but this study doesn't say that we can only give up when we find a gap on the grade 7. It is an invitation for us to pay attention to differentiated learning. If we could do it as early as possible and to start thinking about how we could reduce the gaps uh, for students when they are already at grade 7. This is an ongoing process, and hopefully this can be something that stimulates further studies on this topic. Thank you very much for the additional points, Ms. Melda and Mr. Gilang. For the last 3 minutes, I get one more question from Mr. Faisal. Does this can this study capture the good or bad aspects of the software module components used? What components of the software, Surala software, that works, and which components of the software that doesn't seem to work for students in grade 7? Thank you, Sarah. The study that we conducted couldn't be used to evaluate the impact of each component or each module of the Surala learning software. But if Mas Faisal is interested to see effectiveness of this learning software in general, Surala is not the only one. There are still many other softwares. I believe the most interesting and the most useful feature for the context of catching up with the gaps is first, when students log in for the first time and they share their store their private information, they will get an assessment test. This assessment test result will be used by the software to identify the student's level of learning on math based on existing curriculum. And aligned with the name, adaptive learning, so the questions that will be presented or the stages that will be given will be made online to each student, each individual student. That's the most important aspect. Individual assessment and problems provided based on students' ability level. There are several mechanisms that we can use to make sure that students can really master the lessons. After students doing or completing some problems, there will be an exam to ensure that students' ability or mastery is already gained before students can move on to the next topic. And thirdly, because of students' individual unique account and students' individual data are not stored in computer hard disk and on the cloud, it can be accessed anytime. And on the modules of each topic, such as addition, deduction, etc., we believe that based on our understanding, it's not just Surala. There are also other softwares that have been adapted to Indonesian context in terms of curriculum, but also benchmark against global best practice. But again, of course, we cannot see the impact of each component because our design limits us from doing so. Maybe additional point from me, as I mentioned in the beginning, that we selected Surala through a competitive bidding process. So what we considered then was not only the software, Surala, but also we looked at other software. One of the reasons we selected Surala is that they have a good track record in helping students learning. But the problem is the impact evaluation, good impact are in private schools. So it could be that there are characteristics that private schools have that cannot be carried over to public schools. So that's a possibility. But as Gilang mentioned, we cannot compare every component or issue in every component. But from the competitive bidding, we chose the best one based on track record and also the software itself, the software component and cost effectiveness. So if we were to compare it, we need a different study to specifically compare uh, softwares to see which is the best software to help students' learning outcome, which is not the focus of this study. That's why the study cannot answer that question. Thank you very much for the answer. With that, we can conclude our Q&A session. Apologies for those whose questions are not yet answered due to limited time. We are going to answer your question via email. Thank you for all the questions and all the answers, Mr. Gilang and Bu Milda. There are many insights that we gained from our discussion this morning. We hope this gave us new insights, as Milda said. To researchers, maybe this can be a new idea for you to conduct further studies and also to be something to inspire us if we want to conduct this similar studies. Once again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you to our speakers this morning, Mr. Gilang and Miss Milda. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, we can see you in the next opportunity. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. See you in the next FKP event.